Hello, students. It's a crisp 69 degrees right here in San Diego. Perfect day to snuggle up with your honey and eat some fish tacos. Coming up, 45 minutes of nonstop music, all killer, no filler, right here on JMS 200. Sorry, I just get to see this microphone and feel like I should put on that DJ voice. All right, all seriousness, this is the video lecture about current stuff to deal with the radio industry. You know my routine by now. You saw the last video lecture, or at least you should have done that one first. A lot of historical stuff. This kind of builds on that and tries to cover some contemporary stuff. And look, I changed my perspective from my office here. You can see that framed Marvel thing over there. All right, here we go. Yeah, this corresponds to chapter 9 of the textbook. At the end of the last video lecture, I was talking about some big changes that happened in the 1990s with deregulation of the radio industry, specifically the Telecommunications Act of 1996. That seems like the kind of thing that might be on a quiz. Anyway, that trend of deregulation has continued. And over the last couple of decades, a handful of corporations are buying more and more radio stations, and there is even a this is very current, this is from September 2022, this bill by Senator Rand Paul to remove ownership limits altogether. That's currently being debated. I don't think this is going to happen, but just so you know that that particular trend has continued. One of the arguments is that because of the internet and competition from the internet, that for terrestrial radio stations, that's what we call sort of over the air traditional broadcasting terrestrial radio stations, because of competition from these different media outlets and things like podcasting, and hell, people even like, listen to music on YouTube, that in order for them to survive, that they should be able to band together and exploit economies of scale. The downside is that we have less and less local ownership and the local media outlet is not really responsive to the local community. There was a famous incident in Minot, North Dakota. This happened many years ago, and it sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. It really sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but it really happened. There was a train derailment. Some poison gas was released in a small town in North Dakota. Poison gas is released. The authorities trying to contact the local media outlets to broadcast, that would be the perfect thing for a radio station or a TV station to broadcast that, hey, there's poison gas in downtown Minot, North Dakota. Don't go down there. You're going to get killed. Well, lo and behold, at least for the radio stations, the authorities discovered that not a single radio station was being controlled by a local entity. There were radio stations in the area, but they were all being controlled remotely. You could have a computer, say in Denver, connected to a radio station in North Dakota. The computer in Denver could be connected all over the entire United States and just sort of transmitting music, even having a DJ pretend to be in that local area. They actually do that. They have DJs in one area piped in all over the country pretending to be in that area. So anyway, they cannot contact anyone to actually transmit warnings. And, I don't know if anyone died from this. God forbid people died. I hope people didn't die. But this example is continually brought up at different media conferences that I go to and different academic conferences where people talk about radio as an example of how the public interest mandate was not fulfilled here. I talked about the public interest mandate in the last lecture and how radio stations that are licensed are supposed to operate in the public interest. This is a classic example of what can happen if you have radio stations not operating in the public interest. There are radio stations, I've been talking mainly about music. There are radio stations that play news and talk. A lot of these are associated with National Public Radio. This was founded in 1970. There's, at least 1,000 stations. KPBS is the local station located right here on campus, or at least next to campus. I can practically see them from my office window. NPR stations are often criticized of leaning left. I don't think they are necessarily left-wing. A lot of the talk shows are on AM because AM does better for voice. Music sounds better on FM. Music sounds better on FM. Voice works fine on AM. And almost all these news talk stations are completely dominated by right-wing perspectives. Rush Limbaugh, now deceased, was a massively popular, by far the most popular broadcaster on terrestrial radio. Extreme right-wing opinions. And the people that have taken Rush Limbaugh's place and other things, or other announcers like him, are very right wing. So AM talk is dominated by right wing. And I did want to mention satellite radio, just so that you're aware of this thing called satellite radio. This operates on a whole different frequency than AM or FM radio. And there's literally a satellite circling the planet that transmits. It operates on a subscription fee. Okay, there are some ads on satellite radio, but unlike traditional terrestrial radio, it's not entirely ad-based. It is subscription-based, and you need some type of device. Cars are very popular place to listen, but you can listen to satellite radio at home as well. And you pay a monthly fee. I think the monthly fee is getting pretty expensive. If you have the monthly fee, then they use a digital chip or some software to unencrypt, decode the signal, and you can listen to satellite radio. All right, now I want to talk about this thing called the PPM, portable people meter. I'm going to go over some radio ratings here in a minute. And where these ratings come from. A group of people, not everyone in a particular city is wearing a device. Okay, I'm going to hold up my phone here. It's actually smaller than this. It's actually smaller than this, a little device you could wear on your belt or around your neck or in your purse, wherever. You could put it in your fanny pack if you like to wear a fanny pack. And it has a microphone in it, and it picks up the sound of a radio station and registers that you're listening to a radio station. Now, it does not work like Shazam. Okay, it doesn't work like Shazam. This electronic device does not automatically know which radio station you're listening to, but commercial radio stations who are paying for this service, they put like a silent digital signal, a digital watermark, as it were, in their signal, and that device hears that and triggers that. Oh, I know that's 91X. I know that's Z90, whatever it is. So then at the end of the day, some supercomputer using wireless technology now just reaches out, imagine, sends out a signal. If I'm wearing this, sends out a signal, grabs this, and it says, hey, Professor Arsenault was wearing this device. He was exposed to X, Y, and Z radio stations. Not that I deliberately chose to listen to them. Okay, that's a big key point. Not that I deliberately chose to listen to them. If I'm walking in Keels or Hot Topic, that store, or wherever, and they're playing a radio station very loud, my device is going to pick it up. I will register as being exposed to that radio station. And they also know my age and my income and that I'm a white guy. So they have all this demographic data on me, and then they can take that data. And if you have a sample, if you know how samples work, there's almost 3 million people in the greater San Diego area, something like that. There's a lot of people. If you have a couple thousand people wearing this device, then you can extrapolate. If there's 2,000 people wearing the devices and 10% of them listen to this radio station, then you can say, okay, out of the total population of greater San Diego, we think it's this many people listening to this radio station. That's the way a sample works. Okay, it's not everyone in San Diego or everyone in Los Angeles or everyone in a city, but a small portion of these people are wearing these devices. Okay, now I'm going to go over a couple key terms. A rating is a percentage. And for radio and TV, they work very much the same way. It is a percentage of people out of the entire population. Okay, when we're talking radio, it's the entire population of radio listeners. When we're talking TV, it's the entire population of people who could theoretically watch TV. A share that's the same thing. It's a percentage, but now you're going to remove the people who are not consuming that form of media. For TV, we remove, if there's a million people and 30% of them are not watching TV on a given night, we're only going to take a percentage of the remaining people who are watching TV. Okay, that's the distinction. And a share, using the exact same data, a share is going to be higher than a rating. A share is going to be higher than a rating. Radio in particular really likes to use share. When radio stations talk about their metrics and their audience numbers, they like to use share. Again, it's not everyone listening to the radio, but it's of the people who were listening, what percent of that did we get? Another very specific thing about radio is that they like to chunk things into 15-minute increments. They call it AQH, average quarter hour. I don't know why they started doing this. That's what they do. They want to know within a 15-minute time period, what's the average rating that they're going to get. AQH. AQH share, I've already talked about the difference between share and rating. Same thing. Within a 15-minute period, let's exclude the people not listening to the radio. Of the remaining group, how many of those people do we get? What percentage of those people do we get? And the numbers I'm going to show you are, if it doesn't say anything, it's always AQH share. Radio ratings are reported as AQH share. And this is pretty current as of recording this lecture, very current, September 2022. This is New York. See, we have right here, and they're showing the different months from June to September. That's pretty high. Okay, that's a station broadcasting urban adult contemporary. AC is adult contemporary. So here we, 6.6 AQH share, 5.7 AQH share, and they're saying New York is the #1 market for radio. The markets are ranked in terms of number of people who are in the market, what they define as the market. New York is the biggest. New York is the biggest. LA is second. If you could only advertise a product in any two market areas, New York and LA would be the ones to go for. San Diego is considered number 16. We're not in the top 10, but we're still pretty big. Yeah, they're saying 2.8 million. What is rounding up? That's 2.9 million people. And I don't even know off the top of my head what station that is. KFBG. I think this is Magic over here. KXHRM. The X stations in San Diego are ones that have their transmitters in Tijuana. That's pretty high. 8.1 is pretty high. 7.7 is pretty high. And just for the sake of comparison, I picked Lafayette, Louisiana. Now we're up to market 113. And wow, look at this country station is 10. That is incredible. Anything that's getting in double digits is really phenomenal. Usually popular stations are getting 5, 6, 7 AQH share. So 10 is very popular. Oh, and we have urban adult contemporary. This is rhythmic contemporary hit radio. And I don't know exactly what the definition of all these genres, but rhythmic contemporary hit radio, country, I could guess what country is. As of the most recent data that I could find, the most popular format for radio stations in the United States is country music. Ladies and gentlemen, country music is the most popular format. News, and we're over here. I'm looking at the right column over here. Now, this doesn't mean total people listening, okay? Total number of people listening could be a totally different metric, but just in raw number of stations, the most popular format is country, and then news talk is also popular. Now, I mentioned PPM, and because the PPM is associated with an individual listener, they know me, they know my age, demographic, income, etc. You can actually get some pretty granular information about radio listenership. It's not just the total number of people listening. That Nielsen is the company that provides this data. Nielsen can provide marketers with detailed information. So if you're selling a product, a digital camera, a new type of Lego, a new type of coffee, you could really pick exactly what format you wanted to advertise on to reach, ideally, the people who are going to buy that particular product. You can see the ethnicity. It's kind of interesting that here, country and new country combined. Here, they put Black and Hispanic. Again, this is the term Nielsen is using. I'm not using that term. They have Black and Hispanic, and white is considered other. And I don't know exactly where Asians would fit into this, but white is considered other. I think the reason is that when people are purchasing products to advertise for a primarily white audience, they don't feel the need to define that. It's just assumed that most genres and most formats are going to be aimed at a white audience. However, if you wanted to target the Latin audience or the African American audience, you might want to pick a specific station to do that. That's my theory. There's educational level. You can see that. News talk. News talk is more men than women. And we've also got age breakdown here. Look, almost 40% of the audience is over the age of 65. And then we have another huge chunk over here, 55 to 64. So if you wanted to reach an older demographic, a mature demographic, maybe you wanted to sell some type of medicine, blood pressure medicine. If you wanted to market a cemetery, I'm starting to get those, makes me feel a little weird. It's like, have you planned your funeral yet? Like, come on, I'm not that old. But if you wanted to market that kind of product, this would be a format for you. Probably not contemporary hit radio. Okay, we talked about country. Now we have urban adult contemporary. And here we have almost 87% is classified here as Black. Again, these are the terms that Nielsen are using, not my terms. And this I want to stress because this surprised me when I discovered this a few years ago. When it comes to income, the highest income is all sports. All sports is mostly men, pretty well-educated men with high incomes. So if you wanted to reach a pretty profitable demographic with a lot of people with a lot of money. And rounding out our discussion of ethnicity and radio listenership, we have the Mexican regional, yeah, almost 98% right here as Hispanic. Not a surprise. Okay, it's impossible for me to talk about everything going on with radio in this short lecture, which is probably longer than I thought it was going to be. But just a couple of key points, tips of the icebergs. We do have these things, online radio stations, which are kind of like traditional radio, but they're also personalized in the sense that each person can have their own stream. And y'all know this is common knowledge to you. You can pick the genre you like or the music you like, and then with recommendations over time, your stream becomes more individualized to you. They're like traditional radio, but a little different in the sense that each person has their own stream, and the royalty rates. I know that I've talked about royalty rates already. The royalty rates vary. What you have to pay if you are a traditional terrestrial broadcaster is different than what you pay if you are one of these online radio stations. They actually pay far less. They pay much less. And I think it can be very confusing, very confusing. Information here, don't worry about the specific numbers here because they may not even be totally accurate. Okay, I copied this information a few years ago, and I think it's generally accurate, but let's say it's not totally accurate, generally accurate. Okay, the idea here is to show how difficult it is to make money from these different streaming services and how little they pay. Okay, that's the point, how little the streaming services pay. The information here is predicated on the idea that minimum wage is $1,260. This is ridiculous. You're not going to live in San Diego on that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you thought you were going to graduate, live in San Diego on $1,000 a month, it ain't going to happen. Okay. But if you want to make that money for the sake of discussion, say you are an artist, you release something on YouTube with a label. Labels take most of the money. Remember from last week, you would need 4.5 million streams of your song to make that much money in a month. 4.5 million. You'd have to be monstrous success. Okay. Now, if you did it on your own, DIY, without a label on YouTube, 720,000. That's still a lot of streams. That's still a lot of streams. Tidal, which I guess is still around. Tidal has a higher, pays more in royalty. If you release something on your own and got it on Tidal, that streaming service, you need, basically 30,000. That seems more realistic. Spotify, again, doesn't pay a great deal of money. With Spotify on a label, you need more than $1 million. And then on your own, you need 192,000. All of these companies pay different royalty rates. Okay. But I think the bottom line is they don't really pay that much. They don't really pay that much. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about podcasting. Podcasting has exploded the last couple of years, certainly within the last decade. Podcasts have been around for, gosh, almost 20 years now. In 2004, this guy, he was actually a former VJ on MTV. When MTV was new in the 1980s, this guy with the big 1980s hair was one of the people who had introduced the music videos. He started a podcast. The term podcasting wasn't even used. It was basically a blog that was sort of an audio blog that could be automatically updated. If you subscribe to this RSS feed, you get the new audio files for his blog. And then he wasn't the first person to do it. Okay. Like with many firsts, one person gets popular, but is not really the absolute first. But anyway, worth remembering who he is. That same year that people start using the term podcasting because they were using, the Apple iPods to listen to it. Apple did not create podcasting. The term just kind of got connected to Apple. I'm sure Apple's very, very happy about that. And then in 2005, Oxford American Dictionary says it's the word of the year. In 2014, there was this true crime podcast called Serial. Serial as in the sense of a story that's told in multiple installments, not as in breakfast food, but Serial tells a story, true crime story about this Pakistani American guy, Adnan Syed, I think that's how you say his name, who gets arrested for murdering his girlfriend. And the whole podcast is kind of going back into the case. Did he or didn't he do it? Discovering some inconsistencies. It's a really fascinating, I thought it was fascinating, but it really was the breakout hit of the genre. It was getting something like, 40 million listeners in a week when that was unheard of. Many people never even heard of podcasting. Many people had not yet jumped into the podcasting arena, and this thing just blew up. And to this day, it's fascinating that true crime podcasts remain quite popular. It's interesting how that one particular genre has just sort of fixated and been married with podcasting. But yeah, it was Serial that really helped establish podcasting. And today there are, no shortage of podcasts. Mark Maron has a podcast, which I like, an interview podcast called WTF. Joe Rogan remains very, very popular. And I'm going to go over some information here. I'll put this link in the lecture notes. A study about audio and podcasting. I think this data is from 2021. Okay, now they're talking here. Now, radio is still the most popular single form of media in the United States. Radio, traditional terrestrial radio. But this chart here shows actually a decline from in the high 90%, 96, 97% of people listen to radio in the course of a given week. Now it's down to less than that. Wow, that seems kind of low right there. Radio is still number one, but maybe not what it used to be. Now this shows percentage of people who have listened to a podcast we've got in the past month and in the past week. And you can see right here, this was right when Serial came out. We start to see this increase, pretty big increase now. Oh my God, look at that. Maybe that's like 30%, 35% of people. Still not more than 50%, but definitely a big increase. And I'm sure that when I teach this class 5, 6, 7 years from now, yes, I will still be teaching this class 5, 6, 7 years from now, that, these numbers will go up. Public radio people who listen to NPR podcasts, this number's really gone up. NPR, National Public Radio, which I've already talked about, has really jumped into this and done very, very well. Very, very well, NPR podcasts. And what's interesting is that public radio stations, because of the way they're classified and the way they're defined, cannot accept advertising. There are no traditional advertising on commercial radio stations on the terrestrial broadcast. However, those FCC rules do not apply to podcasts, right? So the FCC rules only apply to the over-the-air broadcasting. So you get no commercials on public radio, but you can put commercials on the podcast for something like MailChimp, which is what Serial was promoting. And we'll end with this online audio listenership. These are things like, people who listen to online audio, which would include Spotify and Pandora and other things like that. We have listened in the past month, listened in the past week. And here we are over here, 2020, 2021. And now when you're looking at just online audio, not specifically podcasting, we have exceeded 50%. We have exceeded 50%. Okay, in conclusion, here's some key points, things that I want you to remember. And again, this is all in the lecture notes. AM radio came first, FM came second. Audio quality of FM is better. Music sounds better on FM. Satellite radio is subscription based. It does have ads, but you pay a monthly fee to get the service. The public interest mandate doesn't apply to online radio stations. Okay, the public interest mandate is related to the idea that airwave frequencies are limited. So if you're doing over-the-air broadcasting, you have to abide by the public interest mandate. If you're an online radio station, you do not have to abide by the public interest mandate because you are not using the airwave frequencies. Hopefully that makes sense. And then finally, royalty rates vary by platform. Even the different online platforms have different royalty rates. And there's different rates for things that you play on demand versus streaming versus terrestrial broadcasting as well. It's very, very confusing, but just know that there are different rates. And if you want to start your own station, you should probably pay a lawyer to find out what you need to pay. All right. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes this video lecture.